Lorelai and Rory's pop culture references on Gilmore Girls. I'm Kyla!
And I'm Taylor! And I've got a sweatband on my head!
Woo! Nailed it.
Yes, we are going to get fit and toned and smart and feel great about ourselves.
Yeah, we have to go home with these bodies, ladies and gentlemen, so let's get them in the shape we want. Yeah!
Woo! And our brains, and our pop culture refs.
Yeah, gotta shape up. Because we've got a podcast.
Yes, I could not remember the next line of that song. You better shape up, because you need a podcast.
Uh-huh. Why do we always turn to song?
I don't know, but I definitely can't remember any other words to that song right now.
And my heart is set on, so it's a show.
You better shape up. Yeah, no.
Alright, I think that's enough, though.
I think in an outtake of the first episode, this is a little behind the scenes, I think something you edited out was, I said, I promise I won't sing every episode. And I'm really glad you edited that out, because it has not been my intent. But I have continued to do that with you!
Yes, I've joined in the fun. So hey guys, we yelled because it ties into the reference. Don't worry, we have not gone crazy. We're not trying to blow your eardrums out. We're just trying to get you pumped!
Yes! Woo! And you can't see it, but as a reminder for Kyla, in case you forget my name, it is on my sweatband.
I love it. And I have a sweatband too, but it doesn't have my name on it, and I'm not wearing it.
Well, in the back of it, here, let me flip it around.
Okay.
It says Buns of Steel.
Is that what you have?
Yeah, well, I've done the Buns of Steel workout, which is why my friend made this, because we used to do Buns of Steel in our high school aerobics class, and she made us all matching sweatbands. And it was awesome, but I might have to apologize to Richard Simmons, because Greg Smithy of Buns of Steel was probably his competitor.
In some ways, but in some ways Richard was revolutionary, but we haven't even said what our reference is about, so we should probably play the clip.
Yes. Fortunately, it's in our episode title, so.
Oh yeah, that is. Oh right. All of our titles reveal what it's about. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I forgot about that. All right, let's just play the clip. We're ready.
Luke, that is an exceptionally good batch of coffee.
Yeah?
Hello?
I added a little nutmeg.
Really?
Yes.
That's very Richard Simmons of you.
Well, what can I say? Chicks dig a man with a feminine side.
Oh.
Take off your flannel and you'll be more feminine.
Wait, I'm sorry. Did she say that on the app?
No.
Oh. That was just a little Kyla commentary.
A little something extra for you.
Oh, good to know.
Okay, so what's happening in this episode, Taylor?
So, well, here's the fun little IMDb description. 2 double dates. Rory and Dean set up Lane with Dean's friend. Todd. Not Rich Blumenfeld, the one that she stroked her hand through his hair. So, Rory and Dean set up Lane with Dean's friend Todd, and the 4 go out. Meanwhile, Suki and Jackson's first date includes Lorelai and Jackson's cousin, Rune! Who is very, very weird. IMDb says very, very. Lorelai does not enjoy the evening. There you go.
But she enjoys the end of the evening.
Oh, look at your little teaser. You've got your little eyebrows going up. You want to explain why?
Well, because Luke and Lorelai share their own sort of date. Their own one-on-one date. As they play cards at the counter. And Lorelai runs away from Rune and allows Suki and Jackson some bonding time. Because they're falling in love.
Mm-hmm. And this is the one, right, where Luke almost asks Lorelai out. He kind of starts to say something like, hey, would you ever wanna... And then he gets cut off.
Yeah. He chickens out. I mean... Or is that when Lane's mom comes in? Mrs. Kim?
Ooh, I'm doing a quick Netflix scroll on the bottom.
I think I remember
Yes,
that
you're
he... Okay, she comes in.
Yeah, because...
But then it's later, like the next episode, he mentions it, and then he chickens out. Because he said, we should do that again. Next time I'm gonna... Oh yeah, do you want to do this again sometime so I can kick your butt in poker? Or something like that.
Yeah. So Mama Kim ruins the moment. Sorry, Mama Kim. Although she's freaking out because she can't find Lane because Rory and Lane had to lie to Lorelai about where they were going. And then Lorelai has to talk about the mom code because she can't lie to Mrs. Kim.
Which, can I just call BS on that real quick?
Ooh, I'd like to hear this.
Because Lorelai does help Lane all the time do things her mom doesn't approve of. She gives her Pop-Tart, she gives her junk food. She sees her changing her clothes into, Mrs. Kim attire versus her fun attire. And did she even take her to a concert? Or no? Anyways.
This is in the next episode. She almost takes her to the concert. The Bangles concert. But then... Then Mama Kim doesn't give her permission.
Okay. Yeah, so that wasn't consistent. That was one of those that fell through, which usually Gilmore Girls is really good about consistency in those types of things, but...
Well, and that's the tricky thing, too, is maybe it's just it could also just be Lorelai's line. Like, she doesn't mind hiding the fact that Lane is wearing different clothes or listening to different music because that's not really a safety concern. But for a mom to not know where her kid is...
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
That would freak a mom out for sure. And I think Lorelai knows, I would never want that to happen to me.
Because then when Lane does run off for the concert and doesn't come back, Lorelai calls Mrs. Kim right away. In a later episode. When Lane has a band.
Yes.
The concert, yeah. She calls her right away. So there is some consistency. I think it's probably, too, just, I understand, Lorelai doesn't agree with any of the rules of Mrs. Kim, so it'd be hard to really help her daughter's best friend abide by that when she doesn't agree with it either.
So tempting, and yet...
Lane Kim!
My mom.
Two moms. That's gotta be bad.
Mama, I was just about to...
Takishiro, Kaja!
Mom, I can...
So not the time, Rory.
You lied to me!
I'm sorry.
Get home! Right now! Whoa. Rough family.
What's going on?
Oh, bits of information were left out of the mom packets tonight.
I'm sorry.
Okay, mother and daughter number 2 are leaving now. Say bye, Rory.
Bye.
I'll call you later. I'll call you tomorrow.
Yeah. Bye, Dean.
That's Rory's mom? She's a babe, man.
And what were you thinking?
I know.
You lied to me. Me. What is that nonsense all about?
I shouldn't have done it. I know I shouldn't have done it.
Damn right you shouldn't have done it.
But Lane really wanted to go out with Todd, and of course she couldn't tell her mother, so I didn't tell you so you wouldn't have to lie for us.
You lied to me so I wouldn't have to lie to Mrs. Kim?
Yeah?
Oh my God, you really are my daughter.
I'm so sorry.
I have to know where you are at all times, especially when you have my shoes on.
I know.
This whole trust thing only works if it goes both ways, kid.
I hated doing it.
Good.
Would you have?
What?
Lied for us?
To Mrs. Kim?
Yeah.
No.
Why?
Because that lady's scary.
So there's our little bit of commentary on the episode, but the pop culture reference. Taylor, did you have any idea what this meant?
So I knew of Richard Simmons. I knew he was a workout fitness guru guy with curly hair, and that's about it. I did not understand the nutmeg part of her quote.
No, me neither.
That's honestly the spice reference. Confused me more than the pop culture reference.
Seriously, is this a reference about Richard Simmons or nutmeg?
Yes, welcome to the first episode of So It's a Spice, and today we're going to be talking about nutmeg.
Woohoo! Here's all these different ways you can use it in cooking, typically with apple pies.
Yes,
or pumpkin.
But also, it's great with coffee.
Apparently.
I know, I am drinking coffee right now, but I should have added nutmeg to my coffee.
You should have.
I didn't. but we
what
can say I
coffee
did.
are you drinking?
I am drinking this morning's leftover Highlander grog from Caldi's. But what I do in the morning is I take what's left over what I do in the evening is I take the morning's leftover coffee and make it iced coffee, which you can hear it rattling now. So,
see, I've always been confused about how to turn regular coffee into iced coffee. Do you just add ice?
in this case, yes. So I put the ice in, and the nice thing about this is to give my own coffee recipe, much like Luke. The nice thing about this is the coffee is already room temperature, so it's not a huge jump in temperature. But when I'm at work and I'm using the Keurig, what I do is I put ice cubes in it while it brews, but I put it on the strong setting so that it doesn't get too watered down. And then it will help it cool down, and then I put ice into it right after I brew it. Because the ice that I put in when I brewed it is pretty much melted by the time it's done. So...
All right. Thank you, Taylor. This has been Coffee Recipes with Taylor.
Yes, and might I always recommend adding your favorite milk? 2% is my favorite.
Interesting.
But now I'm going to have to try nutmeg.
Yes. I'll try that tomorrow morning.
Ooh, good choice.
Yeah. So nutmeg, guys. We got a little too excited about that.
Yeah. As did Lorelai and Luke.
Yes, very much. But hey, it was bonding for them. So I definitely knew who Richard Simmons was. I remember seeing him on TV, thinking he was funny, obviously noticing his flamboyancy. And, but the nutmeg, I didn't know. I just I thought, nutmeg must be a girly spice.
Yeah.
That was, but like, how can a spice be girly versus, like feminine versus masculine?
Well, and what's really weird is it almost made it, without the context, it almost made it sound like Lorelai was saying Luke was effeminate because he was cooking or doing some sort of recipe, which
that's one way to take it.
That doesn't make sense at all because that's Luke's job. So
I'm doing my job.
Yeah, that's totally. And then also, just in general, there are so many chefs of both male and female. Mm-hmm. I didn't know. Male and female varieties.
Yeah, I know.
So, and both of them famous. And I don't feel like you think of someone like Emeril or anybody else on the Food Network. You don't think of them as especially feminine because they're cooks.
Right. Definitely not. In fact, being a chef, that's always, that's been a boys' club. Which is so interesting because it's always been, woman cooks in the house and cares for the children while the man is out at work. But most chefs are men.
I didn't know that.
Well, you know where I realized I got that from?
Where?
Monica Geller on Friends.
I was gonna guess that.
I really think that I got that from her. Oh my gosh. I cannot take my facts from a 90s TV show. I'm sorry.
So, statistically speaking, we are unsure if chefery is a male-dominated field. But according to Monica Geller on Friends, in the 90s, it might be.
Oh my gosh. But doesn't that just speak to our love and dependence on and the importance of pop culture to us,
Yes.
And that's what the show's all about.
And we've definitely made more than one Friends reference in our podcast.
Yeah, we have.
And sometimes you just need it for a laugh. Like right now, my sister is in France, and she sent me a picture of a food labeled noodle soup. And she...
Oh, my word.
She said, this reminds me of an episode of Friends, which I had to rewatch it. And it's the dumbest joke that Joey just can't say, soup. He keeps saying, noodle soup.
Yeah, I totally remember that one. Noodle soup. I mean soup. I mean noodle soup. Oh, gosh.
Exactly.
Uh-oh.
Is there a problem?
Well, this is noodle soup, and I've been working with tomato. But it's okay. No problem. No problem. Noodle soup.
Doing a quick Google search, there are more male chefs than female chefs.
Oh, great.
Yep. Ooh, male with no formal training even. Okay, anyways, but again, this is not a political, except for, this is an issue of gender inequality, so we can hint at that. Because Lorelai was a girl boss, just like never mind.
Lorelai is a girl boss. Also, we could put this article that you find on our Tumblr.
Oh, that I just found?
Yeah.
That I didn't save? I'll find again.
No worries.
If you want to find out more about
the chefs making noodle soup,
just check out our Tumblr. We've got it all. Okay, so I did figure out the nutmeg and coffee, but we're not going to get to that yet, because first we need to talk about Richard Simmons.
Oh! And we got a lot to celebrate today! Hey, do y'all want to dance your pants off?
Welcome to the show.
I made some cookies. Hi, Richard! Try a piece of it. We'll do it together. Come on.
All right, I'm just going to take it.
You remember that scene in Lady and the Tramp when they had that spaghetti?
Sudden.
Just stay still. You're going to hurt yourself. You got knocked by a camera just now.
I don't know where I am. I wrote a song. Can I read it? No. Can I sing a song? I wrote the 4th of July song, a special song.
No.
Let me do this song for Faye Dunaway, please. Number 1, love yourself. Have a lot of self-worth. Number 2, lower your calories and watch your portions. Mm-hmm. And number 1, move those buns!
Okay, all right, go ahead, sing it, quick. Sing it, quick.
Well,
quick.
I have to go over here.
Well, hurry, take the microphone.
I go nuts for cotton candy. I'm a fool for apple pie. A yummy burger topped with melted cheese. I love the 4th of July. I crave the sizzle of a hot dog. Potato salad makes me cry. Independence Day is here. I'm proud in this country. I love the 4th of July. Homemade ice cream drives me wild. A vat of coleslaw makes me fly. Mr. Simmons came to David live in New York City. I love the 4th of, I love the 4th of, I love the 4th of
Richard Simmons, ladies and gentlemen.
The man.
Yeah, we
do. The myth. The legend. The recent podcast subject in Missing Richard Simmons.
Okay, so quick bio of Richard Simmons. We're not going to go super into detail because he is a person pushing 70. There's a lot to his life, and probably he's one of the more well-known pop culture references that we've done, so we don't want to get too deep into the weeds like I did for Nancy and Tonya.
Remember that?
Yes. Oh my goodness. So into the weeds in that one. But I thought, hopefully someone else found it interesting because I thought the whole saga was fascinating.
I found it interesting.
Richard Simmons, he's almost 70 years old and he is a super energetic fitness guru. He had one of the fastest growing weight loss programs in America that was especially popular in the 80s. He's known for his curly hair. He was a huge personality. He was known for being really fan friendly. He did a lot of late night talk appearances. So it wasn't just weight loss stuff. And he was also known for his fitness studio Slimmins out in California. And he, up till 3 years ago, was still teaching classes out there for, I think, only $15 a class, which is pretty inexpensive, especially considering how big of a celebrity he is. So that's kind of his big thing. He was known for helping a lot of people lose weight and for his larger-than-life personality.
Yeah. I think he was certainly on my TV growing up. I mean, was he on yours? Would you just see him sweating to the oldies?
No, but
no?
That's not exactly something my parents would do growing up. They weren't the ones who would do exercise videos at home.
Well, my parents didn't either. No, I just remember him appearing on TV. I just remember seeing him. I wonder if my mom, I don't think she did the exercises.
We didn't do any Richard Simmons videos when I was doing Buns of Steel stuff in my aerobics class in high school, but we did talk about him because we kept calling Greg Smithy of Buns of Steel. We kept wanting to call him Richard Simmons because he also had a very bright, bubbly personality. And so I think for some of us in high school who were not totally on top of the au revoir of 80s fitness gurus, maybe that was not our most common knowledge when you're in the 10th grade or 12th grade or whatever's in. We kind of were getting him mixed up, but so we were aware of him, but he wasn't someone that was very present in my life.
Gotcha. Not a important figurehead. Well, it's interesting that you reference Buns of Steel because Richard Simmons was actually a totally new way of doing fitness videos at the time, because in Buns of Steel and I forget the other ones, but those all had very fit people in it in their professional gear, and they were all trained and doing the moves. But in Richard Simmons videos, you have people of all shapes and sizes, people who are still trying to lose weight or just starting out, and they're wearing whatever clothes they have. So it was a lot less intimidating for people because they're
a lot
not
more
seeing
attainable
models. Yeah, they're like, hey, look, there's someone just like me trying to do this.
And that,
I can do it too.
I will say that was not how Buns of Steel was. These people were in peak condition.
Right.
They were super fit.
Right. And that is something that Dan Taberski talked about in his podcast, Missing Richard Simmons, which has been out for a few months now. It was top of the charts. And I'm sorry, but Dan Taberski could not be here today.
Yeah.
We did try Twitter.
Well, and even my mom, who's not much of a podcast listener, but she does listen to my podcast with you from time to time. Hi, Mom. She was totally aware of it. She was saying she's seen all sorts of news articles in the last few months of people talking about Richard Simmons and what's going on with him. And a lot of that was prompted by the podcast.
Yeah, and we even talked about it a little bit after I finished it several episodes back. And I actually listened to the whole thing again today in one day.
Oh, wow. Well, you can do it because it's only 6 episodes.
Yeah, they're just half an hour each. But if you haven't listened to it, it's really interesting because what happened was Richard Simmons in 2014 dropped off the face of the planet. He used to call people every day, tons of people in his life. He still had that fitness class that you mentioned, Taylor. Mm-hmm. And then suddenly he just stopped talking to people, stopped going anywhere. And he hasn't been seen. That happened in 2014, and Dan Taberski, who hosts the show, he was friends with Richard. He went to his fitness class for, I think, about a year, and he said that he went over to his house once or twice. So, friends-ish, and he couldn't get a hold of him either. So he was like, what the heck happened? And he's just a fan of Richard's and wanted to know what happened. And really, the podcast to me just sounded like a thank you to Richard and, I hope everything's okay. Yeah, so listen to the show if you haven't. It's real interesting, real entertaining. It just flies by because they did a good job. But I also had to say Dan Taberski couldn't be here today because he won the 2017 Webby Award, which is a little award ceremony.
Whoa,
it's not just little, though.
Yet.
It's kind of a big deal. Yeah, he won it for Best Documentary Podcast, People's Choice. So that should tell you.
Oh, great.
It's People's Choice.
Congrats, Dan Taberski.
You'll probably like it, too. Not just the critics. Yeah, and he went up on stage and all he said was Richard Simmons couldn't be here.
Oh.
And left. So probably thought that was pretty clever.
Yeah. And we did actually tweet at him asking if he would be on our show to see if he could provide some additional insight into the life of Richard Simmons. And unfortunately, he said that he did not watch Gilmore Girls, and I think that was too much of a jump for him. So we totally get it. He's probably got a lot of people trying to get his attention right now, but it was very kind of him to tweet back.
Yes, so thank you, Dan, and I hope that you start watching Gilmore Girls because that will open up a whole new world for you, Dan.
Yes.
It really will.
It's great. And I think in the future, side note, if we have any guests who want to come on I don't think you need to watch all of Gilmore Girls, but it would be great to watch at least the
No.
episode of the reference we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, but even, in the Gilmore Guys podcast, one of the hosts had never watched it, so he was just watching it for the first time, so.
Yes.
Offers a fun perspective.
And when we had Sarah on a couple weeks ago, she had already watched the whole show all the way through, so that worked out easily.
Yeah. All 3 lovers of Gilmore Girls. But yeah, the show, the podcast just kind of, I don't know, it reminded people that Richard Simmons, oh yeah, whatever happened to him? And spoiler alert, so if you don't want to know, skip ahead a couple 15-second marks. But in the end, it doesn't really find anything out. It's just Richard just wants to be alone. And he theorizes on that a little bit. One of it is that Richard kind of had this high energy persona that he got exhausted of it, and wanted to be able to just chill out. And that reminds me of 2 episodes ago when we talked about Charo and her persona. And is that really her, or is that just her making smart business decisions?
Yeah.
I could totally see that.
Like, with her, I would have to think some of that is genuine. Like, you don't get that out of nowhere. And the same with Richard Simmons. I think there's obviously something very genuine in there, in that he seems to really care about people, and that he really does know how to make people happy and have an infectious personality. But when it's your job to have that huge personality, that I'm sure can be extra draining.
Yeah. Yeah. But I loved hearing about all these things that we never knew Richard did, like call people, see how they're doing with their weight loss and their fitness. And he was really there for people. Like, it was really touching.
Yeah. And so I am getting the sense from this and from our other conversations, you really loved this podcast.
Yeah, I did like this podcast. Good job, Dan. I listened to it all again in one day just today, so that should tell you something. But it was just like it, because we wanted to talk about S-Town the same time that we talked about this podcast, because they came out around the same time and they had the really big following, both of them. But they're very different. But Missing Richard Simmons was just, like I said, really entertaining, put together, like, good interviews. Yeah, it was just entertaining, It's just fun.
Well, and side note, in our last episode, we said, we'll talk about S-Town in a few episodes. We were wrong. It's this episode.
Yeah.
We got a little mixed up.
A little bit, but here we are.
Yes.
What did you think about the podcast, Taylor? I have just been chatting on.
No, I love it. I'm a little more mixed on the Missing Richard Simmons. I agree, it is easy to listen to. It is super well produced. Dan Taberski, I keep going back and forth. I apologize, Dan.
Hi, I'm Dan Taberski.
For whichever.
I think Taberski.
Okay. I just heard the pronunciation of Richard Simmons a lot more in his podcast, so. But I'll just call him Dan. How about that?
I like it.
Not to be too informal, but just out of respect for his last name. So, Dan is clearly very talented. He's a great storyteller. He found a super interesting topic that a lot of people clearly found interest in. I mean, Webby Award, People's Choice, tons and tons of downloads. And he's also a really good producer, and of course the team helping him out too. Mm-hmm. And I do not doubt for a second that he really does genuinely have concern for Richard Simmons. I really do believe that one of the main reasons he started the podcast was because he wanted to know what was going on with Richard, and he cared about him and wanted to make sure he was okay. Like, I totally 100% believe that. But I feel a little more mixed, and I will admit, I had heard some criticism of the podcast before I listened to it, but I tried to go into it with an open mind, because you loved it too. And so I was like, oh, okay, this is great. Like, I just want to hear what is happening. Everybody's talking about this. But I guess my two big questions from this podcast are, why Dan and why a podcast? So, because one of the things I take away from the podcast is a sense of responsibility. Like, I think Dan thinks somebody should be checking in with Richard Simmons. And he's like, okay, I'm going to step up to the plate and do it. But I kind of can't figure out why he feels like it's his responsibility. If he had done this podcast, I would love to ask him that question, and not in a judgmental way. Just in a, hey, like, why did you feel the responsibility to, like, look into this? Like, because obviously it's not like he's his best friend or his brother. Like, they were friends, but, like, or not even his manager or something. It's like, why did you feel like this is something you really wanted to dive into? Yeah. And then, 2, why a podcast? It does not bother me at all that he talks to all these people who were in Simmons' class or his manager or even his brother. Because here's where it gets weird for me. It doesn't bother me that he talked to those people, but I think it bothers me that he published it and made money off of it and advanced his career in a way without the consent of Richard Simmons.
Oh, okay.
And in the last episode, which I listened to again today, Richard's manager, who will talk to Dan, says something along the lines of, I think this podcast has just caused him more stress in his life and has not actually helped anything necessarily. And, like, also kind of spoilers. I mean, it's real life, so if you want to call it spoilers or whatever.
Yeah.
But, like, in the last episode, there's a wellness check from a police officer, and part of me wants to go, well, why didn't we start with a wellness check? Like, that's kind of, like, to me, a more primary thing. And like I said, I really do believe there's a concern for Richard. I don't think this is coming out of a completely selfish place.
Yeah.
But it just feels, like, sort of weird to me, like, that he did this, published it, made money off of it. But like I said, I don't hate it. I just, like, it feels off. Does that make sense?
Does it feel like invasion of Richard Simmons' privacy because details were shared by other people?
Yeah, and it was done without his consent. Like, if he was no longer living, which obviously is not the case, it would almost be like a research history project. But because he's living and choosing not to be involved, I don't know. Like, that's the thing.
Yeah.
And he's not, Dan's, like, not a, I think this is a form of journalism, but it's not like he's working for somebody like the New York Post or, like, working for a publication that's trying to just, like, it's not just another story on his docket.
Right.
So that's kind of my mixed feelings about it.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
But like I said, it's a really well done podcast, and I don't know. And it's just kind of why I feel mixed.
Yeah. And, you know, the interviews with the other people, I guess I don't see that as an invasion because they're sharing their own experience. And some of them did say, I'm not going to share this, but I'll share this. You know, like they made it clear that there's some things they weren't going to say. And even Dan didn't share some things.
Well, and here, okay, that actually is exactly one of the things. There's something in episode 6. He says something like, I'm not going to share what Richard says because it's really personal. And I was like, okay, so how did you decide to draw that line? Because you're talking about a lot of stuff in here. Like, his potential depression, his potential injuries, his potential falling out, or the fact that he calls his housekeeper potentially a witch, which I think that's almost more damaging to her than anybody else in this podcast.
Yeah, but I felt like that was so ridiculous that was one thing that I thought, maybe just don't put it in, but this person was close to Richard, so if that is his point of view, then what do you do?
Well, and then there's also, well, maybe he's transitioning to be a woman, and, like, that's something really personal, too. And actually, Richard Simmons just sued the National Enquirer for publishing a story that said that.
Yeah.
So, I think that's just, it seems like the lines of what he draws is too personal, feel arbitrary to me. And I think in his head it makes sense, but I do not know what it is.
And I wonder if he just thought that he was going to talk to Richard in the end, and then everything would be made clear and right, you know, but because he didn't, get it from Richard himself, it ended up feeling more like invading.
Yeah, that's probably a good point, because I'm sure he did try and meet with Richard Simmons before the end of it.
Yeah. One thing, though, that what you said, why a podcast, but then you also said, why Dan? And I think that episode 6, where he's talking to the manager, Richard Simmons' manager, is really telling for that.
I think, Richard has this unique quality in a way of, spending 10 minutes with somebody and, they feel like they are his best friend. And it's just a gift that he has, it's making people feel comfortable and making people really feel like they are part of his inner circle, and that's not necessarily true. There's a misrepresentation of the depth of the friendships or the relationships.
So even like friendships that have gone, 10, 20, 25 years, you think maybe that there's a difference in perception about what those relationships meant to each person?
I do.
Wow.
So he says right there, maybe people aren't as close to Richard as they feel that they are. And you could tell Dan's reaction was a little defensive, I felt. So he could be in that boat. And, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Like, there are people who are important to you who are more like mentors, and you have that attachment, whereas they don't have the attachment to you, like camp counselors. I remember being so attached to some camp counselors because one in particular I just had some really life-changing experiences there. And so I felt really attached to my camp counselor, but she's, she was a decade older than me.
Yeah.
We're not friends. But she was really important in my life. So I think some people had that relationship to Richard that made them feel like he owes me something. And granted, I think if a mentor were to just stop talking to everyone, all of their mentees all of a sudden, that's not kind to those people. But where's that line of what does he owe them? And that's something Dan talks about in the show. Does he owe us anything? And he asks people that, and they kind of go back and forth.
Yeah, and that's something I can see how so many people would be hurt that he cut them out of their lives. I think it's totally fair and okay that they feel that. I think because they feel a loss of a relationship and someone who's in their life. Yeah. So I don't think it's wrong that they feel that at all. But it is sort of that question of what does he owe everyone that he had in his life. Like, I love my Zumba instructor, but I kind of don't feel like she owes me to explain everything going on in her life. But granted, it seemed like he was a lot more personal with a lot of his clients than my Zumba instructor is, even though she's great.
Yeah. So I think that just made a lot of people emotional about the situation. And, I mean, Dan, with his career, he was in a place that he had the resources to do something like this. So he did it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, if I were able to do something like this that I thought could be successful, and again, not just for the money, but something I cared about, I'd want to go for it.
And I don't think he did it just for the money at all.
No,
that's not what I'm accusing him of. I think it just, the line gets a little murky, and there's a part of me that's like, okay, what if you had just done all these interviews and sent them to Richard and said, hey, here are a bunch of people that care about you. But now it's drawn, now granted, I'm sure he couldn't have anticipated how popular the podcast would be, because it seems like podcasts, they sort of always seem to come out of nowhere, at least for me. So I'm sure that he did not anticipate this kind of success, but there is a degree.
And he said in interviews that he had no idea it would become this.
Yeah, I guess it seems like it's made Richard's life, talking with his manager, etc. It seems like it's made Richard's life more complicated. And I guess now it's like hindsight is 2020. Like, he didn't know that Richard was necessarily going to feel that way. So maybe I'm seeing it from the perspective of like the final result, because I binged the podcast in less than 24 hours. But when he's working on the project, he didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, if there was genuine concern, he thought that this could help Richard come out of whatever he's dealing with, then, you know, he wanted to go for it because of that, just to give Richard an outlet. But in the end, he didn't want to talk, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think he didn't know what was going to happen, and this is what happened. And he's gotten a ton of attention for it, and, you know, I'm sure he has great things ahead of him in his career.
Yeah,
but,
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Richard Simmons.
Yeah, so there's a lot in there. And if you guys listen to it, we would love to know your perspectives, too. Because
I'm
not totally anti this podcast. There are things that it almost feels like in the worst version of this story, which this is the worst, not maybe the actual, but like in the worst version of this is like a friend exploiting his friend's dark time to further his own career. And I don't think that's the narrative of the podcast, but there's a little part of me that's like, if you want to see it that way, you can.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the other side, the 100% positive best, is a friend being concerned about another friend and wanting him to know that he's loved.
And I do think one of the hopefully positive things is it seems like, for the most part, the response people have had is, oh yeah, Richard Simmons is awesome. Where'd he go? We care about him. So I don't feel like the response from the public has been like, ugh, that guy. It's just like,
no.
Oh yeah, he's cool. Where'd he go?
Yeah. Dan, wherever you are, missing or otherwise.
Winning more awards.
Here's our take.
This is an extended segment of Kyla and Taylor talk about kind of recent podcasts, but not exactly recent.
Yeah. Because they tie in.
Yeah.
Actually.
So, S-Town, another podcast that came out in the last few months, made quite a stir. And what were your thoughts on that one, Kyla?
Okay. S-Town, for me, has been it's been difficult for me to really formulate full and complete thoughts on it. Maybe because it's not a full and complete story. I mean, it's, first of all, very different from Missing Richard Simmons. Missing Richard Simmons, I think, was intriguing and more, entertaining, light. Yes, it had a lot of heart and, there was concern behind it, but for me, it was overall still light. It was more entertaining and intriguing. S-Town, I mean, so complex, and I have no idea how in the world they were able to make that work, but they did. Probably because the best of the best were in that room.
Hashtag NPR.
Hashtag, not NPR. You keep on thinking it's NPR. WNYC.
Well, isn't Serial in This American Life from NPR?
WNYC.
What's WNYC?
It's the Chicago radio station. WVP. Wait, what is it?
I thought Serial and...
not WNYC. That's, it's the Chicago radio station.
I thought Serial and This American Life were from NPR.
No.
Did I just make that up in my head?
Yeah.
Wow.
WBEZ. It's WBEZ.
Wow, you just blew my mind. I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're not NPR. No, they're
Yeah. Okay, now I've got the This American Life bio pulled up on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, whatever they're calling themselves now. It is a weekly public radio show heard by 2.2 million people on more than 500 stations. Another 2.5 million people download the weekly podcast. It is hosted by Ira Glass. Produced in collaboration with Chicago Public Media.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. You just blew my mind.
But yes, WB Chicago, Ira Glass, Sarah Koenig, other people that I can't remember.
See, all these people, I thought they worked for NPR.
No, NPR does not own radio and podcasts.
Oh my gosh. You blew my mind. Okay, well, Boom.
Now you know. Yeah, because all of NPR's podcasts, they all have the NPR.
Yeah.
That's one way to know.
Well, and if you don't know, then now you know. And now I know.
Because we told you.
Okay, so anyway, back to S-Town, which is not done by NPR,
Yes.
but This American Life.
Right, so Brian Reed hosted it, and we can't really, explain the whole podcast right here. You guys really need to listen to it. This is one, definitely need to, but beware, it's not little kid appropriate, and
No.
it's, and
it
can be hard to hear.
Yeah, and not just for stuff like language, but
right,
there's some stuff that is heavy in there.
Thematic elements, right? That's how they do it on the rating system. But it was, it's not a story that goes from A to Z. It's
at all
more of a profile. Yeah, it's more of a profile. You think it's going to be a mystery, and then maybe not so much, and maybe it's a mystery about something else, and there's heartbreak, and, it's just about this small town in Alabama, which, by the way, I wonder if people have now driven through that town and people are like, get out. But I doubt it because it's all the way in Alabama.
Yeah. So the reason we compare this, though, is because it's about one man, and like Richard Simmons, I'm going to not spoil the show for you, but like the Richard Simmons podcast, it's a lot of people talking about this one man who lived in a small town in Alabama. And it's a lot of people talking about him and the impact that he's had on their lives. And there's also a lot of questions about things that happened to him growing up, / a lot of questions about what kind of romantic relationships and his sexuality, and a lot of what else is there? There's just a lot of overlap in theme and the way that it's a profile.
Depression, questions of sanity somewhat.
Yeah, or at least mental health.
Yeah, mental health.
Well, and one of the things, I won't say I have any qualms about S-Town. I do think one of the things that bothers me is in the beginning it sells it differently than it ends. And it starts to set you up thinking this is going to be a really entertaining mystery story. And then in the end, that's not what it is at all. And so I think from a storytelling perspective / I don't know. It just feels a little off to me to try and sell this profile of a man like, oh, it's a treasure hunt, when really it's just the story of a man's life.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think is an important difference between this and Missing Richard Simmons is that the man they're talking about in this invites the journalist. He invites him down to his hometown and asks him to look into some stories in his town and tries to say, please be a part of my life. And he shares a lot of his life voluntarily. So I think that's why these two compare and contrast for me. And I think I feel a little bit about Aston. I do have some questions about maybe some of this should not have been shared in a public podcast. But for the most part, I feel a lot better about it because I know that this radio station was invited to come be part of his life. And he wanted them there, and he wanted them to be part of his life and look into it, into stuff that was happening around him.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a key difference. I really appreciated the way that they treated the subject, John B. McLemore.
Yes, definitely.
Because they went into his world, and Brian Reed, he was in it. He was not standing off as a journalist from the big city, like some people perceived him, but he got in there and he listened, and he, you just believed these people, and not that we shouldn't have, but what I mean by that is they felt just like someone you might know, or a neighbor that you're now getting to know. And they're from a small town in Alabama, and they're Hicks. They say it. They're like, John B. McLemore says, I'm a hillbilly. That's not something they shy away from. And that's, like, a group of people you hear from. You hear from people in suits in New York and
True.
LA.
Not
you
great
don't hear from people in small town Alabama. So I really appreciated, especially right now where we are in time, diving into a place that I don't give much thought to.
Yeah. And I think they don't have a very prevalent voice in pop culture.
No.
So. And I also, one thing I really appreciated about S-Town is it lets the people in S-Town be complicated.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nobody who is all good, all bad. It feels like a real person. And there's one person in the story, too, who is really close with John. And you get to know some of the not great stuff going on in his life and some of the things he will probably openly say he has not done well. And you have situations where you're like, I'm not sure he should be doing that. But also you get to know about the way he was brought up, and you go, oh, he's also got some baggage of, like, there have been a lot of people who have not been good to him. And John was somebody who was really good to him. Yeah. And so I think, to bring it back to missing Richard Simmons, I think that also is a really important distinction, because then you have people like Richard Simmons' housekeeper, who for a whole episode is she a witch? Is she holding Richard Simmons hostage? And then in the last episode, Dan kind of does a little footnote, and he's like, well, actually, she's probably not a witch. She's totally legit. Okay, moving on to the next subject.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that could be really damaging for her reputation if you're not sure about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and he didn't get to talk to her. Whereas he had interviews with people, but in S-Town, Brian Reed really entered their world.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's also part of it, is a lot of missing Richard Simmons is a lot of speculation. It's a lot of, well, it could be this or it could be this. Whereas S-Town is, I feel like Brian Reed has a willingness to say, I don't know. And I think that's really important for a journalist. To be able to say, here's what I see, and here are the facts, but I don't totally know what that means.
Before the jaunt around Shittown, back inside the maze, John and I have stopped walking for a second. We've hit dead end after dead end, and now John is craning his neck and scoping out our options. He scouts his direction.
It is. It's kind of funny to be lost in something you designed yourself, isn't it? Let's see. Oh, no!
We're stuck. Are you really lost, or are you putting it on for me?
Actually lost in our own maze. Isn't that exciting?
So, a few other news items that people have been talking about Richard Simmons besides this podcast. Here's a headline from People magazine from a couple weeks ago. Richard Simmons claims former associate has been blackmailing him for years, bombshell lawsuit reveals. So, apparently, his former associate, Mauro Oliveira, has blackmailed, extorted, and stalked him. And this was part of the lawsuit he filed against the National Enquirer. And he is now saying that Oliveira's extortion led him to... is part of the reason he retreated from the spotlight. But he's being very vague about it. So this is another factor that is in there. He hasn't really said exactly what he was blackmailing him with, or how much of this was part of his decision. But, yes.
Mauro Oliveira is who Dan Taberski interviewed in his show that called the housekeeper a witch.
Yes.
And now Richard Simmons is saying that he was blackmailing him?
Well, this is from People. The suit continues that the National Enquirer and Radar knew and acted in reckless disregard for the fact that the information provided by Mr. Oliveira was false and that he was not a credible or reliable source. So,
where does the blackmail come in then?
It doesn't really say what he was blackmailing him for. So, once again, he's saying something is going on, but being really vague about it. And in slightly happier news related to Richard Simmons, this was also just in the last few days. The person, and I'm going to butcher her name, Kim Herzavec, who was on Dancing with the Stars, she has bought the location of the Slimmon studio, and she is now going to make it a new exercise studio. And nice. Richard has given his full endorsement. He says, I wish Kim all the best of everything in that space.
Nice.
There you go. That's what else is going on with Richard Simmons lately.
Richard Simmons in the news.
That was almost like a Don Pardo voice.
Who's that?
He was the SNL announcer for years and years and years until he passed away in the last few years. And he, whenever, and musical guest, Richard Simmons. Except Richard Simmons was never the musical guest.
No. Although he did sing-song a lot of things.
This is true.
Just do that.
So,
interesting.
There you go.
I should have known. It would have something to do with coffee. Everything in my life has something to do with coffee. I believe in a former life I was coffee.
All right, coffee revealed.
So, in the world of how do we transition from Richard Simmons to coffee connected with Richard Simmons, take it away, Kyla! Good luck! Figure it out!
Hello, and welcome to Nutmeg in Your Coffee with Kyla. Pictures of me drinking coffee and laughing. Right?
Yay!
Okay, so Taylor, you don't understand this still, right? This is not making sense.
No. I really don't. And it's kind of frustrating. Not for you.
I'm about to reveal.
Yes.
Coffee and nutmeg too. So, here's the little tangent I went on. So, first, I sat and I thought, and I Googled nutmeg feminine, and I Googled nutmeg Richard Simmons, nothing. Nutmeg feminine, and I just then ended up just reading the Wikipedia page for nutmeg. And
out of curiosity, what does a Wikipedia page for nutmeg include? Other than the makeup of nutmeg.
Yeah, it did have that. It was uninteresting, to say the least, and I was not able to read much.
I was going to say interesting or uninteresting. Yeah.
Uninteresting, okay. Yeah.
That makes more sense.
One interesting fact, this is Nutmeg Facts with Kyla. In Elizabethan times, nutmeg was believed to ward off the plague. So it was very expensive. But that has nothing to do with coffee or it being feminine or reminding someone of Richard Simmons. So, what I did next was...
just a fun nutmeg fact for you.
Yeah, that was that. So I decided that's not working. So I did find a recipe for putting nutmeg in your coffee, and we will put that on our Tumblr, so you can try that out. We'll try it too. But I asked my mom, I said, Mom, nutmeg... When I say that to you, because she's been cooking longer than I have, is that a feminine spice, a masculine spice, neither? And she said, well, I think it's a masculine spice. I was like, all right, Mom, that's not what I was looking for. Not helpful. Shouldn't have much reasoning for that. Just, I was asking her a very weird question, so she just answered what she felt. So she said, well, give me the context for this? And I said, putting nutmeg in coffee. And then it clicked. So I grabbed my recorder and record our conversation. So tell me about coffee in the early 2000s.
Well, we really just had straight coffee. So it was a matter of Maxwell House or Hills Brothers, but it was all regular coffee. It was a matter of how strong you made it, but there weren't flavored coffees. And then I remember, I would say, maybe even the 80s, that they had an instant coffee, international coffees, but it was instant coffee, and that was flavored. That had chocolate in it, and it was in these pretty little tins, and it was a very feminine thing. Men drank strong coffee. Matter of fact, just to even put creamer in, it was not tough and manly.
So that was what women did.
Right. Cream and sugar. Now, some men put it in, but if you wanted to be tough, you drank straight black coffee. And then flavored coffees, I just don't remember them being around. You know, I drank coffee through the 80s, into the 90s maybe, and I don't remember any flavored coffees. So to have put a spice in your coffee or something, that would have been more a feminine thing than real masculine.
Interesting. See, it's so funny because all I know is, I mean, it's mostly flavored coffee these days. They may not be heavily flavored, but, you know, you have this kind of bean and that kind of bean. And so thinking of putting nutmeg in is nothing.
Right. And you know, we didn't have cappuccino and frappe lattes or
You didn't have lattes?
No.
Oh my goodness. So it's just coffee.
Maybe some incredibly posh places did or something, but average Joe, no, that certainly was not common at all.
So what were coffee shops like?
There weren't coffee shops.
What?
There were little, a bakery maybe where you could go in and get, but you just got a cup of coffee, decaf or regular. That was the question. If I wanted coffee, decaf or regular. That was it.
So no place just to go, have coffee, open your laptop, get on the Wi-Fi.
Yeah, no. No, you might meet someone for coffee, but you'd have a piece of pie with it or something, you know, more in a diner.
Which is what Luke's is in Gilmore Girls, so
yes,
they
would
were
go
totally
to a diner.
fitting that.
Yeah.
So when do you remember seeing or trying or hearing of, oh, hey, lattes are normal, or, oh, hey, there's a coffee shop? When did that term come about?
I would tell you, well, it's definitely after 2000.
Well, that is really helpful because Taylor and I have not been able to figure out why nutmeg in coffee is girly. And here's why. Thank you, Mom.
You're welcome.
Oh. They didn't even have lattes. They didn't have cappuccinos. Nothing. It was black coffee.
Blowing my mind, Kyla.
It's a complete generational thing. Starbucks coffee shops, those didn't come about until early 2000s.
Well, I knew they didn't explode, but I think they were around in the 80s as early as then. They were just a lot more basic black coffee roasts. Okay, and so when Lorelai says, that's very Richard Simmons of you, she's saying that Luke is effeminate because he has flavored coffee.
Yes. Boom!
Okay. Very, yes. The generational thing is
key
very
here.
Yeah, because it's still, like, once you explain it to me, I say, okay, on paper that makes sense, but the fact that flavored coffee is a woman thing is weird to me.
Because it's so basic now. We have all these crazy drink mixtures we can get, 10 minutes down the road. Or 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But yeah, isn't that, that blew my mind. I was like, I would have had no idea. And then my mom actually talked to her earlier today, and she said that she asked some ladies at work, and they said the same thing, that there was no coffee shop. If you wanted to get coffee, you'd go to a diner, like Lorelai is doing. Or like even Dunkin' Donuts just had black coffee.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm really glad I'm alive when I'm alive, because I really like milk in my coffee.
So, Taylor, do you understand do Do you understand Lorelai and Luke's moment together?
Yes, I understand. Well, I understand it because you explained it to me. But the thing is, this dialogue would make zero sense if it were written today.
Yeah,
and that's
absolutely.
why it's still throwing me a little. Because the Richard Simmons, like I said, this episode is actually So It's a Spice. Because the Richard Simmons, yes, I knew that some people find him effeminate and that he is known for, like, his really boisterous personality. And I guess because Flavored Coffee in 2000, which I believe this is the last episode that aired in 2000 for Gilmore Girls, because the next episode was early 2001. Apparently in... Oh wait, I take it back. This is the first episode of 2001. January 18th, 2001 was when this aired on the WB. And apparently at that time, flavored coffee was a very feminine thing.
Well, it wasn't even a thing. Like, they didn't have flavored coffee. So, like, milk in coffee was feminine.
I see. Well, here we are. And here we are, 16 years later.
And I've got
it
pumpkin
was just
spice
Frappuccino
coffee.
Happy Hour a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. And I have pumpkin spice coffee in my coffee cart. It's madness.
See? Yeah.
Give me my whiskey
Gotta get
and
that
my
unicorn
cigar.
Frappuccino.
See? Oh, I tried one of those. And it was actually fine, but it was like candy in your mouth. In liquid form.
See, this is why I don't really do Frappuccinos. They often make me sick.
Yeah, I don't ever get Frappuccinos. You know what my drink is right now? Oh my goodness.
What is your drink right now?
Starbucks cinnamon almond milk latte.
I had
so good.
Something similar to that recently. And it was good. And I'm
yeah,
glad you like it.
I usually get it iced, and it just has a little bit of sweet, but not a ton. Some places they put in too much of the the whatever stuff, but other places put in the right amount. And they use almond milk, which is terrible, by the way, if you just get an almond milk latte, because their almond milk is so weird. But in this one, where they put other stuff, it totally works.
So what is your drink of choice when you have a free reward?
I don't get free rewards because I'm not a part of their thingy, their gold thing.
Kyla, you should be.
But you have to, like, buy a lot of coffee every month to
No, you really
be in
don't.
It, right?
No. You just get points for every dollar you spend.
You do?
Yeah.
Why am I not in this, Taylor?
I don't know. It's a great thing.
Taking care of me and my coffee needs.
Well, I'm doing it now. So every time you go there, if you show them your thing on the app or swipe your card, you get, I think, 2 stars for every dollar you spend. And when you get to 125 stars, you get a free something, whatever you want.
I need this.
It's great.
I will get that.
And they'll give you little bonus perks. Like, they might give you a star dash. Like, if you buy a latte and a green tea this week, you'll get 25 bonus stars or something like that.
I would like that because every Sunday I go to Starbucks and edit this podcast.
Yay! Okay, do it! This has been Taylor Explains the Starbucks Gold Card Program to Kyla!
And I'm even drinking out of a Starbucks water cup.
That green lady is always my Woman Crush Wednesday. And maybe next time you go, you could ask for them to put nutmeg in your coffee and see what they say.
Aww.
That's very Richard Simmons of you.
Yes, I now understand this scene as well. It is very surfacey, though, just to use Richard Simmons as a reference because he is effeminate. So that, like, there's a lot more to him. But
You're right. That's a stretch.
Yeah, it was, like, and you could tell, even when she delivered it, she was like, how very Richard Simmons of you. You know, it wasn't a direct, I know this is the perfect spot for this reference. And maybe that was because she was a little bit flustered. She was having a good time with Luke. And her brain wasn't fully functioning as love does to you, as Lorelai says.
I'm afraid once your heart is involved, it all comes out in moron.
Yes. Yeah. Which is maybe why she made a reference that was not very... what's the word? Long-lasting? Eternal? I mean, it's very dated now.
Yeah. It is.
Not the Richard Simmons of who he is, but that perspective on flavored coffee and Richard Simmons.
I mean, flavored coffee and lattes and Starbucks, those were just about to come as they gave this reference. So, funny how they didn't see that coming.
So, that's our show! Thanks for coming to our Slimmons class, our specific event of brain working out and pop culture working out. And, oh my gosh, I'm going to regret saying that. Kyla, this is another one of those in our podcast area quotes.
What did you say? I didn't hear it. I was yelling.
I just said I don't even remember. And it didn't make sense, but I was trying to say something.
Well, I'll just include my yelling. We'll overpower each other. No one will have any idea what we're talking about.
Woo! Woo! I just think back to one of our early pop culture references of ours to the Steve Buscemi 30 Rock moment of, how do you do, fellow kids? And sometimes I think that's how I sound on this podcast. I am not that old, and I already sound dated. No. Like that nutmeg and coffee reference.
No, that made us sound young, though, because we didn't know that flavored coffee didn't exist at one point.
Thanks.
What, Mom? You didn't have a cell phone growing up? How did you live? What is the... What about the internet, Mom? Did you read encyclopedias? Oh, nerd.
Because that's how all millennials talk.
Yeah.
Which
for the Starbucks Frappuccino.
Yeah. For the record, there is nothing wrong with aging. I just don't like feeling older than I actually am. When I am out of touch with the youngins and the fellow kids, that will be okay. But I am still a fellow kid, kind of. So I'd like to be a fellow kid.
I understand. I was dancing to DDR, which I just bought for my Nintendo Switch.
Yes!
Love it. And I've been dancing, and I was dancing to... Oh, what was it? I like the song, too.
Every time we touch, I get this feeling.
A little newer than that.
Because we always did that song on DDR.
Oh.
When it was big in middle school.
Ah. Well, it was something else, but it was good, and I was enjoying it, and I was just like, yeah. And then, a song came on, and it had, like, the dancers who were on the TV was like a mom, dad, a boy, and a girl kid. And I was just like, oh, when I have a family, then we can all do this. And then I realized, wait, when I do have kids in the future, these songs will not be cool. I was like, that's weird.
Gotcha.
Anyways, this has been a tangent. That is our show.
So it's a spice, and so it's a concern about our relevancy to future potential children.
Yes.
There you go. A deep look into our fears for the future. And if you
have
anything that you would care to add about our understanding about Richard Simmons, about S-Town, about nutmeg, I mean, there are so many things that we did not cover in all three of those topics today that you are more than welcome. We would love to hear from you. Tweet at us, send us an email at soitsashow@gmail.com. Send us a tweet at soitsashow. Leave us 5-star reviews or 4-star, but preferably 5-star reviews on whatever platform you listen. Things like, are they Apple Podcasts now? Whatever they do, rebrand themselves.
Did they really? Just people, Apple, iPhone, whatever. Just the place where the podcasts appear.
Whatever you want to call it. Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Podcasts, whatever. We would love to hear from you, even if it's a 1-star review. We want to know what you could do better. That said, we would prefer 5-star reviews, and we would give you a shout out on the show.
Yes, definitely do that, guys. It helps other people find us and listen to us and know what to expect.
Yes!
And you can tweet at us individually. I'm at Kyla Katnedu, KYLACARNEIRO.
And I'm Taylor, and you can find me at tblake24.
Woo! Thank you again, guys, for listening. We love you all. Love that you listen, and we will talk to you again oh so very soon.
Yes. So, peace out. From So It's a Spice.
Bye!
Bye! Yes, and here's what we're going to be doing on our next, probably not as verbally loud and yelling episode.
Hey everybody, this is my mom, Lorelai. This is Louise, Madeline, and Paris.
Oh, very good girl group names. Okay, so, sorry about the House of Horrors here. Some crazy lady volunteered to lead this charity thing, and we're trying to get her some help, so make yourselves comfortable. Rory, just yell when you guys want pizza.